everybody. This is Heather George, and I've got Brandy Simonson with me, and we're going to be talking to you guys about aligning multiple initiatives. So, again, all of you are School Climate Transformation Grant awardees. Congratulations again for that. We're just finishing up our second year of that at the state agency level, and today we're going to talk to you about these aligning multiple initiatives. But as a reminder, these webinars have been set up in a non-traditional kind of webinar format, and it's more of a kind of a professional learning type of community where it's an opportunity for all of us to come together and share and ask questions and be able to network better with each other. But we've always got a few slides at the beginning just to kind of set the stage of key features and how this might impact state education agencies. I want to remind you that we are recording this, and this will be posted up on the PBIS.org website. And there are handouts from today's session on the few slides that we are covering, and you can download them directly if you are on the computer right now out of the files box. But we'll also post those handouts up on the website as well. As a reminder to you, if you are using your phone, to make sure to put your phone on mute, to use that mute feature, because I think we want to make sure that we don't hear any background conversations or dogs barking, and I'm hoping that my dogs just don't bark during the time I'm talking to you guys. Also, if you guys could type into the chat box which state that you're from. Some of you, I know your names who you are, but I don't know all of your names, and some of you have logged in through the phone. So if there's any way that you're able just to type in, so it'll help us get familiar with you guys, which states are participating. And I know at some point Brian Williams, too, if he's not participating today, he'll be, which I think he is.
I'm here.
They'll give us I see you there, Brian, so I'm glad you're here today. It'll give us a good sense of which states are able to participate. And again, this will be archived as a permanent product on the PBIS.org website, so it can be viewed at a later time if people couldn't make it. And I know it's a tough time of year with the summer and everything. So what we're going to do is, if you have questions as we're going or comments, please go ahead and put them in that chat box. And then, as you know, we're going to turn this over, and you will then be given the opportunity and unmuted so that you guys can talk amongst yourselves, and we'll help facilitate that discussion. So Brandy and I will make sure that we'll be as clear as possible. We'll work to shift gears on the webinar based on your questions and responses. We're not using any polls today, so no worries there. Hopefully you'll avoid multitasking so you can share your insights with everybody. We're going to give everybody an opportunity to speak within the 90 minutes, and it's a short time frame for all of the SEAs to be able to come together. So if you are sharing something, I think we ask that you try to be as concise as possible, because if we do have all 12 states participating, there's time can go by pretty quickly. Again, ask questions, and we're going to make sure we have fun today, in case you forgot about that. As a reminder, we're recording this. All right, so let's get into talking about multiple initiatives. And first of all, I see that we've got Wisconsin, Michigan, and Montana that are here, which is awesome. And again, all of the phone numbers that are there, I think because you're participating through phone, you're probably unable to type in where you're from. So at some point, maybe we'll be able to try to track those numbers down and figure out what states are participating. All right, so let's talk about aligning multiple initiatives. So you guys know at the state level, and even our districts are dealing with this, how do we deal with all of these various topics that are going on? I mean, how do we deal with underachievement, the school violence, disproportionality and equity, restraint, seclusion, bullying? All of these different areas are a major problem. The issue is we have more programs or initiatives or practices than can be implemented well. Because of all of the problems that are occurring out there, as you guys know, it's like the medic comes in and says, okay, we need to get this program to fix it. And so then we have like 1,000 programs in our state, all trying to address very similar types of issues. So the key is, how do we help try to come together and align all of these various programs and still make sure that we're meeting the needs of these various issues that are happening, and be the most efficient in the way we're doing it and to be effective in it without necessarily adding more to that pieces of the puzzle. So let's talk first about alignment and kind of what that means. And so I'm glad to see that Kent McIntosh is on this call, because I've actually cited him on this, so hopefully I cited him correctly. But the emphasis overall when we're talking about alignment is that there's emphasis on that sustainability piece and that efficiency. How can we make sure that we're meeting the needs as quickly as possible and being effective with that? And then how can we make sure that it lasts over time? And so one of the major variables to sustained implementation of those effective practices is the introduction of new initiatives. But the problem with that is that occasionally when we introduce new initiatives, they come across as competing with our existing resources. And that has an impact on sustained implementation. And then there's times when we introduce new initiatives and they may contradict existing initiatives as well. These are actually going to have problems, as you guys know, with alignment. They're going to have problems with just basic implementation within our state and district structures. How do we move to developing this highly efficient standard operation procedures versus small-scale demonstrations? And I think, most of us, as we've learned PBIS over the years, some of us may have learned, how to be really successful around an individual student way before the years of when we called it Tier 3. And then some of us may have come in at that level of entry of working at an individual school and developing that as a demonstration school that moves through the continuum of support. And other people come to see it, and it's a great representation of an effective and efficient system in how they're addressing behavior for all students. But then that moves into, if there's more programs, more schools, how do we move from that individual small-scale demonstration to actually looking at, we need to step back and create some type of standard operation procedure so that we can help to align these various programs that are happening. Because one demonstration school may not be having the issues of, say, bullying, for example, versus another school that may be having a lot versus another school that's having bullying and disproportionality. So how do we bring all of these together? So I just want to help set the stage of what these essential features are of effective alignment before I turn it over to you guys to be able to start sharing. First of all, it's starting at the organizational level where there's a common budget authority that exists. So I know you guys are SCA level, so it's not one of those things where you're going to have to take on the entire Department of Education at the state level. I want you to think first on, you may just need to take on a particular bureau in the Department of Education at this point. So that's still a lofty goal, but at least it's not the entire building at this point. But we have to think of, where is the common budget that's affecting these various programs? And then what's a common outcome measure that can be used across these various initiatives that are occurring to help assess effectiveness? Because oftentimes these outcome measures help dictate what types of curriculum are provided, what types of supports are provided. And so if we can try to find a common outcome measure, that can help to start to bring people all together on the same page. And then building that aligned professional development by comparing and combining all those core features. So we've got to look at, what are the fundamental assumptions that all of these various initiatives actually share, and then what are the differences between some of these fundamental assumptions of the various initiatives. So starting with common core features, common practices used to achieve those features. It's important to start looking at that, as well as looking at determining how to incorporate additional core features. So one area, they may have common features, but the problem is, it's missing something. Okay, we can add to that. And then looking at, how do we, let's compare and contrast based upon these commonalities, how can we actually build one single curricula that can help address the needs across all of these core features, and then that one common outcome measure actually can help assess our effectiveness. And then again, that gets back to that logic model conflict. So, you know, are we looking at our inputs and outputs aligned in this process? You know, Georgia's done a pretty cool job where they've actually were trying to say, how do we bring all of our agencies together across the board to address the issue of reading and get all kids to be reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade? And it's a statewide initiative they've got put in. They've got till 2020 that they've put as their goal. They've hung in there pretty tough where they haven't started to push that deadline out to like 2022 or anything like that. And so they're looking at, first thing they had to do is they went even broader and they went outside of the Department of Education. They started to say, we've got to, let's develop our common agenda for change. And what is a common agenda that all of our various bureaus have here at the Department of Ed and at the state level? And they said that there's issues of language nutrition. We've got to have kids that have access. There must be a productive learning environment, and there must be teacher preparation and effectiveness. And PBIS in particular, a multi-tiered behavioral framework, definitely falls under that protective learning climate. And from being able to identify this common agenda for change, these 4 themes were able to start to bring together their serious silos across the state to say we are all working together for the same children. So what this led to is being able to identify what are the shared values across all of these various stakeholders. And so they all realized, you know, they had high expectations for kids, that they're going to use children, that children will be able to use their voice, that every data point has a face, they're going to hold themselves accountable, that race and culture is not going to be a barrier. It's all of our kids. And that was the piece actually that actually brought people together and got them to officially sign on board. And they wanted to have an epidemic of literacy. They had realized that in order for them to be able to get their kids reading at grade level proficiently, they had to at least get them in their seats first. And that's where they were using PBIS and trying to improve the school climate to get kids to school, get them motivated to want to learn, and then we'll bring in effective teaching on top of that. So again, this is just a quick snapshot of an example of what one state has done to start aligning their multiple initiatives and how to bring them together. So let's talk a little bit about the implications overall that this might have for you guys at the state level, including Florida. So just know that Florida is not exempt at all. We have our many, many issues of trying to align our multiple initiatives. So the implications at the state level is being able to identify what's actually being offered and available. And I think that might be one where it's easy to identify some of them, and others are one of those things like, what? That's been happening for how long? I had no idea that's been in the state. So trying to figure out what actually is being offered and available can take a little bit longer than we anticipate. And then once we're able to start identifying that, start to build those conversations with those folks that are in charge with that, stakeholders. I put in there building conversations because I don't think it's an issue of just initiating conversation. It's an issue that we have to continue those conversations. We've got to make contact with them, help them start to, let's talk about key features, let's talk about common outcome measures. But then we've got to continue those conversations if we truly want to have aligned systems. And then from there, it's identifying those fundamental assumptions, those common outcome measures, and then hopefully everybody is still excited to work together and sees how smart that would be to work together to start moving towards building a single curriculum for a state that is going to meet those fundamental assumptions. So, and then continuing to market it for sustainability. And I think that's the piece, because there's so much turnover that occurs in everywhere in which we work. How do we continue to keep it out there, keep it fresh, and keep it that this is the priority for your state, and how you've made it and aligned it so that people don't start accidentally creating new silos or starting to go rogue in this process. So that was it for my intro, setting the stage, throwing the information out there about what it means on aligning multiple initiatives. Now it's your turn to to talk about what's currently happening regarding supporting alignment of the multiple initiatives at your state. And you guys all have microphone privileges now, and I know Brandy has microphone privileges, so let's hear what you guys have to say. And it could be as simple as we haven't started anything at all. And that's okay too. That's a starting point. We've got to realize where we are in this process.
This is Brandy, and I don't think anyone is on from Connecticut. I don't see them in the phone numbers anyway. But I know in Connecticut, I think if we were participating from the state perspective, folks might have more questions than answers, and I think that's also okay. So if you guys are kind of hesitant to speak because you don't feel like you have the perfect answer, I think getting the conversation started with questions you have would be really helpful as well.
And if you wanted to go in and start talking about barriers too, that's perfectly fine. This is an opportunity for you guys to be able to network, and so we want to be able to meet the needs for you.
This is Susan Bailey Anderson from Montana.
Hi, Susan.
I wanted to make sure you can hear me because I'm not in my office. I think I want to talk about just one example of alignment, and I think there are some other people from Montana on here because I invited them to be on this call, but we also received one of the SAMHSA grants, and, we had to write those together, and even though it's been really, really difficult, I think, to figure out how we align, it's also because of the two grants, it's made us come together and do exactly, I think, what you were, looking at there in the beginning is what do both grants say they have to do, and, what's common core pieces. And, of course, PBIS, or what we call it MBI, Montana Behavior Initiative, in Montana is the foundation. And I know it takes an enormous amount of time from the coordinators of those grants. So they meet weekly to talk about all those issues, of alignment. So I think what we're learning from bringing those two grants together, and finding common purpose and where, what do we want for our youth in Montana, and the ongoing meetings, the site visits together. I know it's been very important and really key to show at the state level to those schools that we're working with that we are working together. So when making site visits with the two coordinators together, showing, that, yes, we are aligning at the state level, because I think our schools sometimes think that we, at the state level, don't know, like Title I is doing that, Special Ed is doing that, that they don't always think that we do align. But we've been very purposeful and very intentional about how we, are working with those two grants. And so I know that the coordinators meet weekly. We meet monthly as an integration team, and that includes several divisions in our office as an integration team, so we can lay it all out, what it is we're doing. And so, I think that's a real beginning, and if we can take and apply what we're learning, trying to pull these two grants together under a common purpose and alignment, and then having the integration meeting once a month with our Indian Education Division, with our our homeless coordinator was there in Title I, and then we have special education represented, and our health enhancement or safe and drug-free schools are, come together, and we try and integrate. I guess that's the purpose of it. So I think Tracy Mosman might be on, or Jordan Brown, and they might be able to add something to that alignment piece. I don't know for sure if they would be willing to do that. But was that what you're looking for, Grant, or Heather?
That was great, Susan. Thank you. This is Heather. Yeah, that was great. If anybody wants to chime in, or if anybody has questions for Susan, please go ahead and ask them. Susan, since you were willing to put yourself out there first, which I appreciate that, I wonder, did you guys experience any issues in trying to come together the first time? I mean, it's unique. Florida's in the same boat in that we also received the SAMHSA grant. And so one of the requirements was to set up a state management team, which brought together, it's a great opportunity to bring all these various agencies together and to build, that collective vision in aligning these multiple initiatives. But I know not all states also have that SAMHSA grant, which that state management team, is a requirement. So do you guys experience any barriers in that process or issues that made it a little difficult despite the fact that you received all this money from the other grant?
Yeah, and I would lean on my colleagues who are on the phone too to talk about this. So when I was talking earlier, I was talking specifically what we're doing right at our our state level, and then I forgot to mention that state management team. Yes, I think there has been a number of barriers, and one of them was we did get, and I think the last meeting there was a great representation of lots of different agencies, but identifying what that common goal or common purpose is, because you bring, I'm trying to, I think back to your, that slide, because, when you have, say you have people there from your department, our Department of Public Health and Human Services, and they have issues with, say, child abuse and, all the things that we're interested in, but each of those agencies or those groups like their thing and want to push that forward. I think it's hard to find what that common, well, we all want kids to be successful and we all want kids to be safe and all that, but to find some, those alignment pieces. And I think that and I haven't, I've been out on medical leave, but I know that some of the things that, one of the things that they have settled on, which I think is very cool, is that they are using part of the meeting to do it's like case management. So when the SAMHSA schools brings a specific case, like a student, and that needs several different services, and then they walk through, how do they get mental health? How do they access, other kinds of services? And I think using that model is bringing, it's alerting all the other agencies that think that they have the perfect system, and if you just refer a student, then it'll all happen. So there are barriers for parents, and there are barriers working together. So, and I don't know if, like I said, my colleagues might be shy, but they're the ones who are really doing that. And I think that has been, it took several meetings to get to why are we all here? And it's great to hear about your grant, and then we, talk about the climate grant and, and the things we're doing and have those schools there, but why are we all here? And I really think they're onto something by taking a case, a real kid in Montana, and walking through what the services are and how it impacts each of those state agencies. It has been really key. And so, I don't know anybody wants to add anything to that. So. Oh, Tracy Moslin is, so my colleague Tracy put something in the chat box, Heather.
Yes, I can see that. And of course, the landscapers are right outside my window, so I'm trying to mute that to avoid that for you guys hearing that. But yeah, so Tracy had written also from Montana that Susan's done a comprehensive job covering that, and so they didn't have anything else to add. So great job with that, Susan. You know, for Florida, how I mentioned to you guys, we also have the SAMHSA grant and have the state, PBIS project grant, and then we also have the state level school climate transformation as well. And so there's this big commitment of money already at the state level, and then there's this extra boost from all of these federal money too, which is fantastic. One of the issues that we've had, and that it was a great opportunity, that state management teams are required for SAMHSA. The folks were brought together. But one of the issues that we're dealing with, and they started to, look at tracking, okay, a child comes into the system, what are all the various agencies that they access? And one of those things was kind of the first step to help identify what are some of these key features, and then where are some serious loopholes that we have in the system. But one of the issues that happened recently is that the fiscal agent who, at our State Department, one of the lead people is no longer there. And because of that, a lot of tasks are not necessarily getting completed as efficiently as they need to. And we're starting to see some big state agencies starting to look away, or they're starting to, it's not that they're not committed to kids, it's just like, wait a minute, if somebody's not keeping this momentum going, I'm going to send somebody else below me. So rather than having the chiefs of these various departments coming and participating, now they may have like people that are 2 or 3 levels below them that are being sent to that meeting that don't have any impact or authority to make change. And I think that's something that's a barrier, and that, yes, we can't control people to stay in certain jobs and what happens with that, but we've always got to be on top of it, trying to continue those conversations going and try to always keep that momentum going, because as simple as one person leaving, how that can have an impact, and especially if it's a critical person who's been leading that at the state level, that can be a problem. And then there's several steps that have to go back, and sometimes it takes even longer trying to get some of those people back to the table again. All right, how about anybody else? You've heard from Florida, you've heard from Montana, a little bit from Kentucky, sorry, Brandy, you just moved, and I know you didn't know that, but.
Awesome.
And from Connecticut, so other states.
This is Amy Alaniz from Michigan. We're having kind of the same type of scenario here in Michigan. We also have a SAMHSA grant, so we do have our established joint state management team, and that actually is running really well. We went through some of the rocky patches in the beginning. It started out just through our Safe Schools Healthy Students grant with the SAMHSA a year before receiving the School Climate Transformation grant, and then we morphed several grants into the state management team. So now it's kind of a joint state management team instead of just the SSHS. So in the beginning it was pretty strong, and then we had some of the same issues with some people falling off or sending lower level people and whatnot. But we just made sure to be very, very deliberate on what the topics are that we're discussing at those meetings, to really involve the other key agencies so that they feel like their voice is really, really heard and important to those. And so now we're starting to see more of the conversation switching to, hey, this person at this agency would really benefit from this as well and have some things to offer. And so it's really growing into something phenomenal. So we're actually having some pretty good luck with that.
That's awesome, Amy, and thanks for sharing that. The Georgia folks had it. So I think you brought up a great point in that we've got to task folks with things to do, and then it starts to blossom, like you said. Oh, this other person should be here, because obviously we can't know every single person who should be there and what's happening out there, but that starts to create that spider web effect. And so I know the Georgia folks, they realize we can't just bring people together and call it a summit or call it a statewide planning meeting on how we're going to align initiatives if we don't give them something to do. Otherwise, they're just going to look at it, they'll nod their head, they'll give their input, and then they leave and continue going back and doing what they always did before. And so I think that part requires a tremendous amount of planning that I think a lot of folks don't talk about that happen behind the scenes to get ready when you do pull all these agencies together for discussions. You got to plan what these talking points are going to be, what are the activities they're going to work on, and then what types of tasks do you want them to do, and that you're comfortable with, because that means having to let go of some control. And so I think that's part of the process that doesn't always get talked about, but it's a really, really important process to keep the stakeholders at the table and continue to move forward.
Absolutely.
I think just a slightly nuanced version of what you said was to make it reinforcing for them, because I feel like sometimes when we get into conversations, at least in my state, which is Connecticut, not Kentucky, but when we get into conversations within our kind of state PBIS planning team, we often think about ways that we can bring people in kind of to serve the greater good of students, but from our own focus. And so I really liked your comment about thinking about how it's going to be reinforcing for them initially to participate, so making sure the topics are things that they're going to engage with. I thought that was really smart. What are other folks' either successes or structures and strategies or barriers?
Randy, this is Heather. I'm guessing it's quiet out there because either it's one or two things, that everybody already has all of their initiatives completely aligned within their state, and so they've got it handled, or two, they are so overwhelmed by it they don't know which question to ask. Anybody want to give me some ideas of where you are in this process? Well, I see Delaware's typing, so that definitely initiated something for Debbie.
You guys have been thinking about, well, again, Debbie, I just saw you say the voting for number 2 with questions, but you guys have actually been doing a nice job, I think, of maybe not figuring everything out quite yet, but really trying to integrate at least PBIS and SEL kind of through the School Climate Transformation Grant, but that's work you guys have been doing before that grant happened.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. I couldn't figure, I muted my phone and then I wasn't sure how to unmute it, so I was like, well, let me just try typing. We are working with social emotional learning integration, that's true, but I feel like that's more at the partnering with the districts to do that as opposed to within the State Department of Education, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Yep.
And so, but that's a big focus, and some of our districts are using different programs at the district level. Like right now, we're doing a lot with Second Step because that seems to be, especially with our grant schools, a really popular program that they're using. So we are really doing kind of some of the things that you talked about earlier about looking at what are the key features that are in common, what's missing, and how can you integrate, if you're teaching expectations, which are covered through the Second Step curriculum, and where are the missing pieces that they both kind of enhance each other within a comprehensive universal system for support. So we do have some tools that are in draft, but I could probably share if people were interested in how we're helping people walk through that with SEL curriculum and their PBIS program.
Yeah, this is Amy from Michigan. I would be very interested in seeing that.
Okay, great. And it's the other one, I don't know if other states use responsive classroom, but that's the second one that I would say we're really working closely with, because a lot of our schools have had that in place, and some of them see them as conflicting. But we are collaborating with the trainer that does most of the training in our state, and she's really on board now, seeing how these two things work together, which has been wonderful. So I feel like where we're weak is having a true state team with all the players. We're kind of going at this, reaching out to each individual player to establish relationships and partnerships, but it's not as organized as I would like.
This is Heather speaking. Was that Ashley from Nevada just talking?
That was me again,
Who
from
was
Debbie,
that?
about responsive classroom.
Oh, Debbie.
Yeah, that was Debbie.
Okay, thanks, Debbie. Sorry, I was trying to figure out the voice at that point.
Oh, that's okay.
No, I think that brings up a really good point, because all of us, there's no right way in which you have to start. You know, I mean, the idea of, okay, we're going to take the entire state or a state department and address this. Like I said, it's a huge, lofty goal, but I think some of it depends on where are these school climate grants really being, where's the core implementation team housed? And if the core implementation team may be housed at a university, even though the state agency is the fiscal agent, that might have a different implication with how you're actually starting to figure out what's the best method for aligning initiatives. Also, everybody has submitted something slightly different on what they were proposed to do with their school climate grants. So some folks are focusing on just, a few districts and adding a few more each year, where I know Florida, we had submitted and we said we're going to boost this across all of our state, because we already had a statewide system. We were already in almost every district in the state. We're going to use this money to boost what we're already doing. So I think it depends on part of, what did you propose in your grant, but then what actual, what access do you have as that implementation team and leading it. And, quite honestly, what we learn in those districts, I mean, even starting at the school level and all of the various initiatives that are happening, it is engaging. It is essentially resource mapping that we're doing, and then taking it a step further on that resource mapping to move it, to more of an aligned, more of an efficient and kind of simplistic way, as opposed to having so many different initiatives. But then moving at that at a district level and being able to do that, essentially the state is just that larger beast, and that's what takes a little bit longer. But I think what's important is that aligning the multiple initiatives, we're going to need to be doing that wherever we are, at the school level, district level, and however we're supporting our various folks out there in our grants.
One other thing in Delaware that we just started to do, we have schools that are identified by the Department of Education as focus schools because of the challenges within those schools. And the districts, we have overlap between the schools that we're connecting with through our school climate transformation grant and schools that were identified as focus schools. And we've just started doing this, but because they're a focus school, they have to develop this very comprehensive action plan that addresses, academic areas, but they almost all have a piece related to school climate, culture, social emotional learning, or something like that. And we've just finally gotten some headway in collaborating with the groups that are helping the schools with their focus school plans. So that hasn't moved very far yet, but we're trying to get the schools to see that their PBIS plan, their school climate plan through us, should be part of their focus plan. Just what I think you said earlier, Heather, just addressing that piece. But our schools were very frustrated because they were getting upset with having to create these two plans, which was completely understandable. And unfortunately, we weren't ahead of it. So the plans were created separately, But now as we're moving forward to help them implement those action steps, we're beginning to coordinate our work with the schools.
That's awesome, Debbie. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Kent had just posted a link up there on the website if anybody hadn't seen it regarding responsive classroom and PBIS. Thanks, Kent.
Mm-hmm.
Do other folks have either kind of small things that they've done that have helped them to integrate at the state level, or additional barriers that you'd like to share and maybe have some group conversation around? One of the things I know I was taking notes on, as different folks have already shared, are some of the kind of structures that folks have put in place. Some of them were imposed by grants, but others might be things that you guys were doing anyway. Kind of ways to kind of think about the reinforcement of people for doing the alignment work and bringing people to the table. And I thought it was fantastic when Debbie mentioned that they had created some forms or products that were helping facilitate some of those conversations or activities. And I know that's the third prompt Heather had up. So not to say we're done with the first two, but that would be another thing to maybe mention, is if you guys have come up with ways, either in writing or in process, that have helped facilitate some of the tough conversations with folks.
Brandy, this is Heather. One of the things that we've started doing is, we were always funded to build district capacity even before we got the school climate grant. And so one of the activities that need to occur in order for a district to stay active with us, they must engage in an annual action planning process with us, where they're sitting down, looking at their data, we're identifying areas of need, and that's helping to determine what the training and technical assistance needs are. And one of the things that we've added into it this past year is, I think informally we were doing a bit of a resource mapping, because district coordinators would say, oh, there's this other grant happening, and I can't pull my people for training because they're pulling their people, and yet it would be a grant that was a similar type of initiative for behavior. And so we had created this form for this resource mapping activity, where essentially we sit down with that district coordinator, and that helps them. It provides a template to be able to try to go out and identify what these other people are, or these other possible competing initiatives and possible aligned initiatives, or potentially aligned initiatives out there within the district. And it helps them to be able to identify who those key people then are in their district. And that's been really helpful for folks, especially for some of our larger districts. I think we have 3 or 4 of the largest school districts within our state. And it's getting them, a reason to say, oh, now this is who this person is, and helps them open up that conversation. But then they're able to put everything onto this overall form, this resource mapping across, the triangle, and that's something then we know, okay, we can help identify, do we have the right people at the table when they come together for that district action planning process? And this is the part of where then we'll summarize that resource mapping activity so that we can put it up there, and we can start to open up the conversation of, look at all that's happening across the district, all related to behavior across the tiers. And they'll start to see, like, oh my gosh, even for some of our large districts, they had over 165 different things happening for behavior across the continuum. And they were like, that's insane. There's no way we can do any of that well. And it's like, that's the whole purpose of that. Okay, now that we've got the right people around the table, let's figure out which ones we're going to weed down. Where do we actually have some data on ones that we know that we are having an impact and that they are evidence-based? Where are ones that we still are committing to doing training for if a school wants it? And then are some of these, which ones of them are actually pretty synonymous, have these core features? And then that helps to start to build that, single PD model around it, so it's not feeling like it's all separate program PDs that are occurring. And that's something that's been really helpful, and I'm happy to share that resource mapping activity.
That would be great.
Are there other folks who have
Anyone else?
Go ahead. Are there other folks out there who either have resources they want to share or further questions or comments related to the integration piece?
Heather and Brandy, this is Susan Bailey Anderson, and I was wondering, it seems like resource mapping is beginning to come up in lots of different conversations that I've been in. And this might be pretty naive on my part, and maybe I just haven't really looked. So I'm just asking, is there something written or like a tool that we can use for resource mapping and then share with our schools that we're working with, like, I don't know, some sort of template or something? Or, this is, I get what it is, but I just thought maybe there was some way to direct it.
This is Heather. I know, the SysUp folks had come up with the hexagon tool. I'm not sure if that would be considered officially a resource mapping activity, but it's possible. I can take a look at it and see if they could. Like I said, I'm happy to share what we're doing. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I know we use the hexagon tool, with our, talking about another grant and aligning initiatives with our MTSS, our SPDG grant. So, I was just wondering. I'm sure there must be something somewhere. It just dawned on me right now that seems to be a term and a process that has come up more recently in conversations than in the past, resource mapping. So
I think it's gotten more visibility. Yeah, it's definitely gotten more visibility, and that term is being used more often, even though I think folks were engaging in a lot of it already. But it would have, I'm going to have to do some research on it because I'm pretty sure it's come out of a different camp, not related to behavior. So, right. And again, we borrow everything from everywhere else.
Thank you.
This is Debbie from Delaware again. We call it asset mapping when we do it with the schools, but it's the same idea. And we do it both ways, like Heather, you were talking about identifying people. So we have the teams, this is for Tier 2 frequently when we do it, but we have them look at the people resources in the building and then the program resources. So they kind of think about it both ways, which
Good.
Yeah, is I think is important to look at both.
Thank you. That's good advice. Let's look at both.
Yes.
And for those of you that aren't on the computer, Brandy has posted the link up there for the hexagon tool, in case you wanted to take a look at it. Are there any, it may not be actual products that are completed yet, but is there anything else that you guys think that, gosh, it'd be really helpful if there was a product like that? It could help with some of my conversations or help with some of our meeting planning or help with us, even start to get an idea of how to align our initiatives. Are there any questions like that of wishes, of types of products that you think would be helpful for you out there that may or may not exist?
So this is Brandy. It seems like a lot of the meetings I've been in, kind of at least across some of the Northeast states, one of the conversations we keep having is even just kind of a crosswalk of programs. And I think early on, Heather, and then maybe it was Susan, had mentioned kind of getting to the practice level instead of just the program level. I know in Connecticut, folks have spent a lot of time during crosswalks between some of the major initiatives within our state to show how they map onto the triangle. But those have kind of been at the kind of name of the program level, and it hasn't really unpacked what practices are involved in each of those kind of packaged programs or other approaches to social behavior, school climate, those kinds of things. Have you guys seen good examples of a crosswalk? Has anyone done one at the practice level? So it sounds like we'll make tons of a splash if we can actually pull that off in Connecticut then. I know kind of in our state at least, we have talked about doing it at a practice level because one of the barriers we're running into with alignment, and I sit in the university, not the State Department, so I think they might have a slightly different perspective, but from where I sit, there's kind of a misunderstanding of the different interventions. And because folks don't have enough depth in what's involved in each of the kind of approaches, they're making these sweeping statements about where things can't align that are actually untrue if you were to actually look at the practices that go into that. So at least for us, I think when we talk at the intervention or the program level, we get some really mixed understandings, but I think if we unpack some of those things and we could think a little bit more about the resources involved, the practices involved, what it takes to implement, I think we might make some better headway than we've made so far.
This is Debbie from Delaware. I think my understanding, I think what I'm hearing you say is kind of what we experience with responsive classrooms. I don't know if this would be an example, but some of our schools that implement responsive classrooms said we can't do PBS, what we say PBS in Delaware, because it conflicts with responsive classrooms. But really, when you looked, and that tool that Kent put up is a good example. When you looked at the actual practices, I mean, there's a lot of teaching of behavior. There's so much alignment across the two. There was just some disagreement about how you acknowledge kids, but it was a very small piece that could be problem solved around when you actually looked at what the program was doing. Is that what you mean, Brandy, when you're saying the practices?
That's a perfect example.
Okay.
And responsive classroom is one that we've worked with a lot within our kind of school and our district level training. We have a couple of other practices that are showing up at the state level in terms of kind of pushback around integration, but I think the issue is the same across those.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's having those opportunities to get together and actually just also talk about what the program's really all about, and those same outcomes and core values that you shared before are consistent.
I agree. I think it was Susan earlier who gave the example of having an entire team that contained or included folks from a variety of different kind of pieces of the State Department, really focus on what it would look like for one kid. Could also be applied at the classroom and at the school level to think about what do these different things look like if we're not focusing on the name of the package, but we're actually thinking about kind of the pieces of the initiative and what the school would experience or what the classroom or what the kid would experience.
Yeah.
Any other questions or resources to share? So Heather and I were thinking we had allocated up until 3:30, but these, like we said at the beginning, are not traditional webinars where we're presenting to you for an hour and a half. We wanted to give enough opportunity for conversation, but we are also happy if folks don't have questions or aren't able to participate because of kind of how you're logged into the system. We're also happy to close out a little bit early. Before we do that and before we finally close out, we did want to remind you that we do have some upcoming webinars scheduled. Again, these are all going to have a similar format. So the idea would be that we present on content, and these topics came from you guys in your survey. I think Tim scheduled them on certain dates, but these topics were things that I think came from your recommendation. So the next one is on July 29th, and that one's going to focus on high school challenges. Heather and I are going to facilitate that one, but we're hoping to be joined by a member of the high school work group. So we have folks that are actively doing a lot of research and work in high schools. There will be one on September 23rd. I'm just reading these for those of you guys who aren't looking at your computer. So on September 23rd, Tim and Heather will facilitate a webinar around rural challenges. And on November 18th, Tim and I will be facilitating a webinar around coaching networks. But in each of those, it'll be a brief presentation followed by kind of us facilitating a conversation or discussion with you guys. So if there's questions you guys have, you might want to jot them down ahead of time, or if there are things that you want to make sure we address in our presentation, maybe discussing in the webinar format isn't super comfortable, but you do have questions, feel free to send those to us and we'll try and incorporate those into the presentation. And or for the high school one, at least bring in somebody who's kind of an expert in that area so they can help answer some of those questions. So with that said, are there any closing comments, questions, resource sharing you'd like to do?
This is Brian. I just wanted to say thank you guys. I thought you did an awesome job, and I just wanted to thank everyone who participated today for joining us this Friday.
Thank you, Brian. It was nice to have you on. It was nice to see so many folks representing a variety of states, people kind of at the national level representing the PBIS Center on the call. We've got a good range of people. So hopefully this was helpful. I know I at least took some notes of things I want to go back and talk to folks about within Connecticut. And for resources that folks mentioned, if you wouldn't mind sending those to Heather and I, we will either have those posted on the PBIS website or we will send those out through email, depending on what the resource is. If you have a preference and would prefer it either to be posted or not to be posted on the website, please let us know that. I think at least Debbie and maybe one other person mentioned them being in draft form, so we don't want to share it more broadly than you're comfortable with.
I appreciate that.
Of course. All right, hearing no questions, I'm trying to make sure I've given enough wait time for people to unmute. But hearing no questions or comments, I just want to say thank you to Heather because I thought she did a great job opening up the presentation, and thanks to you guys for listening and participating. And we will see and talk with you all on July 29th, if not before. So enjoy the beginnings of your summer, and we'll talk to you soon.